Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back for another episode. This week, another deep dive into Helloween and their back catalog. We go back to 1991, and their Pink Bubbles Go Ape album. But boy, has a lot changed for this band as we kind of go into the 90s. Before we get there, how are you, my friend?
Well, technically you were right both times because the album was released in 91 and 92, depending on where you lived.
Also true.
I'm good. I'm sorry. I want to just apologize. It's taken us 152 episodes to talk about shit and lobster. So
well, it was long overdue, but I assure you we will cover the album and the B-sides in just a little bit. I want to talk about some new music as well, but I just wanted to thank everyone who's recently joined our Patreon page. We invite everyone to check the link in the description for those that are interested. We appreciate the support. It enables you to make requests to the show, early access to all the episodes, amongst other perks. So we would invite everyone to take a look at that. And again, thank you for your support.
And this episode's a good episode to mention it in because the patrons are getting this one pretty early. This is going to end up in their feed about 4 or 5 days earlier than the public release. So if you just can't wait for that next episode to come out, I mean, typically we get it out to the patrons a day or two in advance, but this is one we're doing a little bit further out. And as soon as it's done being edited, it'll be on their private RSS feed. So just a little something extra for the patrons. But yes, I echo the sentiments. Thanks to everybody that's signed up so far. We hope that it's been worth your time and money thus far. But it's been a lot of fun. The extra stuff, the monthly Zoom call and the bonus episodes and stuff. It's been kind of cool, like kind of fun to do a little bit more.
And lots more on the way as well. I want to mention 3 things that I heard this week, all of which could not be any more different, but I got enjoyment to varying degrees from all of these things. The first is a band called OSM. Their album just came out called Plagued by Doubts. They're from France. These guys do a really interesting blend of melodic death metal and symphonic metal put together. I guess you could consider it an EP. This release, it only has 6 songs, but each one clocks in, at least 4 minutes. Some of them are well over 7 minutes. Really, really interesting release. I had been aware of these guys, but I had never heard, a proper album by them. But this was really good stuff. I'll make sure to post the song by them during the week. And then the complete antithesis of that. Are you familiar with Pride of Lions? Have you ever heard of that band or the name of that band?
No, it doesn't ring a bell, actually.
They are on Frontiers. They've been around for about 20 years or so, and it's an interesting combination of guys. It's a guy by the name of Toby Hitchcock who does a lot of stuff with Frontiers, and he's kind of a guest on a lot of that stuff. But the other mastermind, if you will, behind Pride of Lions is the guy who wrote Eye of the Tiger. So it's a really interesting mix of like melodic hard rock and metal, but done with a modern flair, awesome production, just a really, really cool sound. And I bring that up because their new single Dream Higher was released earlier today. It's May 9th that we're recording. Just a really, really cool sounding band and something that you can kind of put on in the background and just tap your toe to. Catchy melodic stuff. So we go from melodic death metal to melodic rock to something that I guess could only be described as like folkish doom metal. I'm not really sure what I would call them. The name of the band is called Kornaktuan, and they're out of Finland. Don't ask me to pronounce that or spell it, but it's a really interesting release, a doomy, folky type of thing with a female vocalist who does quite an admirable job on a lot of these tracks. Another kind of band that I've not heard mentioned anywhere, but I think it's worth a listen. I'll post one of their tracks as well. And so when I wasn't listening to this kind of oddball release from Helloween in a number of ways, I was listening to all this other random stuff. So it's been an interesting week. And knowing what's in the queue for next week, I think we go in a completely different direction than all of these bands. So I encourage everyone to take a listen.
Sounds like I have a lot of homework to do because I didn't recognize anything you just said.
I think I'd be curious to get your thoughts. I think Pride of Lions will probably be the one that sticks out the most to you, but I have a feeling you'll appreciate all three.
Very cool.
So let's get into Helloween. Let's get into Pink Bubbles. It's funny. We've done a number of albums by this band. We obviously did Walls of Jericho. It was one of our first episodes. We talked about the Keepers album together as kind of one big, album. And obviously we did their latest release shortly after it came out a couple of years ago. But we go back in time as we kind of march through their entire discography with your choice, Pink Bubbles. And this is where things go off the rails in many ways. If people were kind of expecting Keeper of the Seven Keys Part 3, that is not what they got. And this didn't come out long after Keeper. I mean, there was a few years in between, but for the most part, they toured the hell out of those Keepers records. And then they took a little bit of a hiatus, changed members, and came out with this. It's kind of a fascinating story.
Yes, it's really kind of surprising that the band survived these two albums, Pink Bubbles Go Ape and Chameleon, because it like between the poor reception and the unavailability of to get these albums in certain regions because of the issue that they were having with Noise Records, who was their original, their original label released Walls of Jericho and the Keeper albums. They fulfilled their contract with them by releasing a live album, which came out in three different forms, depending on where you are. It was live in the UK. If you were in Europe, it was I Want Out Live if you were in the US, and it was Keepers Live if you were in Japan. But basically it was the same live album. Some of the versions got Rise and Fall as a bonus track. I think the American version did not. And then they also released a greatest hits type deal called The Best, the Rest, and the Rare, which had pretty much most of the B-sides that were recorded during the Keeper session, including some of the Walls of Jericho tracks sung by Kisk. But there was a bunch of drama with the record label, and they would sign on to EMI Records, who would be known for the record label that the Beatles were on at one time. So, it was a prestigious label, and just a number of things did not work out. Due to the lawsuit that was going on with Noise Records, the album was only able to be released in Europe, I believe, initially. I think it didn't come out in Japan until the following year in 1992, like I had alluded to earlier, and it wasn't released in the US. When we got the albums when we were in high school, we had to import Pink Bubbles and Chameleon because there was no American version of those albums at that point in time. I'm looking to see when it would have actually been released for the first time in the US. And, come to think of it, it was probably when they reissued those remastered and expanded editions of the whole catalog in 2006. So that's how long it took for. Maybe there was a release before that. I don't think there was, but I could be wrong. But I remember, and I'll tell the story of my first time hearing this album. But that's kind of in a nutshell what was going on and what led them to this. And then, as you mentioned, Kai Hansen left the band. It was a amicable split. But oddly enough, his supposed reasoning was that he didn't want to do so much touring. And then he would go on to do 25 years of Gamma Ray. So much for that. They brought in Roland Grappo, who we had the pleasure of speaking to, the co-founder of Master Plan, and still running strong with that band. But he would join the band. He was in a band called Rampage, I believe, prior. I used to know, I think like one of the members of Helloween at the time were fans of the work he did in Rampage, I guess. And that's why he came recommended, and he comes right in and he's writing songs and he's doing a lot of guitar solos. So he's got some influence right off the bat. He has more songs on this album written, than Wyke does, which is interesting. But, they also bring on a new producer, Chris Sangarides, I believe, is the pronunciation, which was not something that Wyke wanted, to my understanding. And this kind of begins the big rift. It was kind of like Kisk and Ingo on one side and Wyke on the other. And I think Marcus was more on Team Wyke, and I think Roland was just trying to keep the peace. That's kind of my understanding of it.
Matter.
But yeah, it was very, there was a lot of internal drama with this album and the following album, Chameleon. And like Justin had mentioned earlier, we didn't plan for this to work out this way, but at this point, I think we're just going to go through the Helloween discography chronologically moving forward. I didn't consider that when I chose Pink Bubbles Go Ape. It was after that I was like, oh, we're pretty much just marching through the discography minus the newest release. So I think for the sake of not having to pick favorites, we'll just continue down that line. So maybe a few months from now, you'll be listening to the long-awaited Chameleon episode. But
oh boy,
yeah, you knew I was going to be long-winded when I said we were talking about Helloween. So I'm off and running.
Well, let me jump in for a couple seconds. Chris Sangarides, for those that don't know, has had a remarkable career as a record producer and sound engineer and mixer, working with artists such as Judas Priest and Yngwie Malmsteen and Overkill, who we covered on the podcast, and obviously a lot of pop acts as well. But it's just a who's who of who he's worked with. I mean, Black Sabbath and the list goes on. And I say that to say, working with him was supposed to be, a really good thing for the band. And on the heels of those very successful Keepers albums, they really should have taken the next step with this release. And one of the most interesting things to me was that the band spent close to £400,000 in order to record this. And yet, by all standards, I think it was a really big flop in many ways and not what the band was expecting. And this was partially due to the failure to distribute the album widely, partially due to the fact that it didn't even hit the American audience for many years, unless, like we imported the album, years after its release. But it was just a confluence of events that really kind of set this band back, and it's amazing they ever recovered with Master of the Rings and into the Derris years in the late 90s.
Yeah, that I'm looking forward to talking about that, because that is quite the rebirth. But interestingly, like another thing that was kind of in the way was that they weren't able to tour this album right away either because of a lawsuit that was going on. They weren't able to start touring until about a year after the album was released, which kind of coincided with it being released in Japan finally. And then they would go on to tour Japan. We'll definitely have to post this week the video from German television where there's a pro shot entire concert during this tour that took place in 1992 in Cologne, Germany. And Roland had the original footage from his personal collection that he posted onto YouTube, so we'll post that version. It has some of the tracks that didn't actually make air. It's the full show. But there are some really cool, there's a amazing version of How Many Tears on here. And then a bunch of songs from this album that the band didn't really play live anymore. Especially once Andy Darris joined the band. The only songs they ever played off this album after Andy joined the band were The Chance, and Mankind was played very briefly during the Master of the Rings tour. The Chance was played through the Time of the Oath tour. I believe it was on the High Live album. I don't remember if they played it when they were touring Better Than Raw. Did they play it when we saw them in New York City? Do you recall?
I don't recall. I don't remember.
Well, that's what the internet's for. But so yeah, like it's just it's a really fascinating time and a fascinating album, and I think that people have softened their stance on. I mean, these albums were. I just remember people just like supposedly hating them when I first got into the band, but then we would reach a point where we bought all the albums, and there was only 2 Helloween albums we hadn't heard, and so we had to get them. We had to hear this, what was these missing songs. We both were familiar with the chants from the High Live album. That was really at least my only knowledge of any of the songs from these 2 albums. What was the you purchased these albums before me? I remember this very clearly. What was your impetus for buying this album in particular? And do you remember what your initial thoughts were?
So I remember buying it because, having had just about every other release of theirs, I needed to hear more, right? So I bought this and I bought Chameleon. I spent a fortune to import the albums, but I had to hear them just because I was such a massive fan of the band, and I continue to be a massive fan of the band. And I remember absolutely hating these albums. I mean, Chameleon more so. I found it like almost unlistenable when I was a kid. But even this, I always said to myself, oh, the album only has 2 or 3 good songs. And I kind of felt that way for years. I remember buying the album in either 1998 or 1999. And for years, I just said, oh, well, it's got its moments, but it's just a kind of a weak release. But over time, I think I've done, if not a 180, darn near close to it, just because my opinion has changed vis-a-vis a lot of these songs. And I'll kind of highlight that, I guess, as we go through the album and we do the deep dive. But as much as I can listen to Chameleon, I think that I like this album a lot more. And in many ways, it's not that much of a departure on certain tracks from the Keeper stuff. It's only a departure for a handful of songs, but like, then again, you also heard songs that like Rise and Fall, which were kind of goofy on Keeper 2. And some of this stuff is not that far removed from Rise and Fall. I mean, it's different.
Yeah, or even Dr. Steen. I mean, it's not a particularly serious song.
Well, of course.
Yeah. I think the biggest change is really losing Kai as a songwriter.
Right.
You're losing that. Really half of that songwriting powerhouse that he was with him and Wyke. But I've talked about this before. Like, I thought Roland did an admirable job as a songwriter replacing Kai. I mean, he had a totally different style, but he wrote some of my favorite Helloween songs of all time, 2 of which are going to be on this album. But, Still We Go from Master of the Rings. There's a number of songs that he, just go check out Master Plan's Pumpkins album. It's pretty much every song he ever wrote for Helloween except for Crazy Cat. I have to ask him why he left Crazy Cat off of that, because that song is fantastic for all the wrong reasons. Yeah, I remember, and I don't know if you remember this, but you left your book of CDs at my house one time, which probably was the only time you ever did that, because like we were attached to our book of CDs like more so than we were to our girlfriends at the time. and it was right after you had I remember you bought Pink Bubbles and Chameleon at the same time, and I was like, all of a sudden like this light starts shining from the corner of the room, and I was like, oh my God, I popped it in, and I remember listening to the first 4 tracks, but I remember Kids of the Century and Number One particularly like standing out to me. I'm like, holy shit, like there's some good ass Helloween music that I haven't heard before. And so I remember I used a first time coupon with CD Now. I started a second account and under my dad's name to get a discount, and I imported the 2 albums, and I remember I got those and the Symphony of Enchanted Lands box set.
Wow.
All imported from CD Now. And I remember staying home from school the day that I was expecting them to arrive in the mail. This was before the days of like tracking numbers and shit.
Was this to intercept the package so that your parents didn't realize that you had ordered a box set from Italy and 2 albums from Germany, or was this just because you wanted to listen
on their credit card?
Correct.
Yes.
That makes sense.
So I took a stab and guessed they were going to show up that day, and sure enough, they did. And I spent the day playing Castlevania Symphony of the Night and listening to Pink Bubbles Go Ape, Chameleon, and Symphony of Enchanted Lands of all things. I really liked both albums right off the bat, and I think it was just a matter of if it was Helloween, if there was a Helloween logo on it, I was on board. Like after we saw them at Coney Island High, and they did play the Chants. I just checked, so we did actually hear the Chants live once. I was hooked. Like that, they became my favorite metal band. They took the mantle from Sabotage. Sabotage had a really strong 2 years, but Helloween came in and stole the mantle. It's probably more like a year and a half, really. But and they've been like ever since. They've been really like my favorite power metal band, Power Quest notwithstanding. So yeah, that's why I always tend to have a lot to say when we talk about this band.
Well, I think that with that backdrop, let's kind of get into the album because, as I said, I've done a 180 on a number of these songs. Some of them I still love, but lots to get into. This album opens, unlike the Keepers albums, it opens with a 36-second track, the title track, authored by the one Michael Kiske. How would you describe the title track on this? I'd like to hear your thoughts right off the bat.
We went from Initiation and Invitation to Pink Bubbles Go Ape, the title track. I don't know, it's just this kind of like just a goofy little acoustic ditty that just kind of opens things up. It's barely a song, but it's got Michael Kiske's fingerprints all over it. I mean, there's just that kind of goofiness. His goofiness and Wyke's goofiness were very different kinds of goofiness. But do you want to know what this song reminds me of? You're going to laugh.
What does this song remind you of, Chris?
When I would go over and hang out at Ralph's house, when he turned on his computer, his Windows intro, instead of like the Windows chime, he set it so it would play the 30 seconds of Pink Bubbles Go Ape. And I was
Get
like,
out of here.
I didn't even know what it was at first. That was the first time I heard it. And I was like, what the hell is this? He goes, oh, it's Pink Bubbles Go Ape. Like I should know. And so I wonder, I doubt he remembers that, Ralph, as a self-admitted poor memory. But yeah, that's what I think of when I hear that.
That's really funny. I don't really have much to add there, except I'll say this. I find it refreshing that Kiske doesn't take himself too seriously, because when you have a set of pipes like that, I mean, they could just go in there and be super serious. I find it actually surprisingly catchy for what it is. And then it gives way to like the first proper track, which you mentioned, Kids of the Century, also written by Michael Kiske, but arguably the most Helloween sounding song on the album up until this point. In other words, you could have put this on the Keepers albums, and I don't think you would have been like, this is a complete outlier. This is a song that ironically in many ways has a bit of a Gamma Ray feel to it. And I know Kai Hansen doesn't perform on this, but every time I hear Kids of the Century, I think of Time to Break Free by Gamma Ray, which Kiske is also singing on Land of the Free. Just a really great song, awesome layered backing vocals, and immediately you can hear Roland's presence because there's this bluesy guitar solo that Michael Wyckoff didn't play. It was all Roland, and it's just a phenomenal song with a great bridge and these soaring vocals. And I mentioned this, I think, last time we mentioned this when you were covering the album, or mentioned that we were doing this album. I saw them play this track live the second night they were playing New York City on their most recent tour, and I absolutely marked out. I never in a million years thought I would hear Michael Kiske sing Kids of the Century, but my God, It was so good. It was probably one of my favorite things from those two shows because it was completely unexpected. And I was just, it was such a surprise because they didn't play it the first night. And there they were playing this, kind of like a forgotten classic in many ways. It was so, so much fun.
Have you ever seen the at Wacken years ago? There was this kind of, it was like an orchestra and metal band combined, and different singers would come up on stage. And I think who am I thinking of? Ex Ingve vocalist. I know that covers a lot of ground. Not Soto, but one of the earlier guys.
Gordon Edmund.
No, not him. Whatever, I'm gonna forget. But anyway, he was there, and I was just watching. I was like, "Oh, this is kind of cool." There, like, a bunch of guys come up, sing like older songs. I think Jennifer Haben from Beyond the Black came out and sang a song. And next thing you know, Michael Kiske comes out, and they play "Kids of the Century" with an orchestra on stage at Wacken. I was like, "This is amazing!" Like, and this is before Kiske and the band would kind of mend fences. I always thought that was really cool. I've always really liked this song. I think it's catchy as hell. You said you think it's the most Helloween-esque song Kiske wrote on this album. I think it's the most Helloween-esque song Kiske ever wrote, period.
Yeah, it's very fair. And there's other songs on here that he wrote that I really like, but this one I think is the most in tune with the old style. And it's interesting that they would open with it. To answer your question, no, I have never seen that video, and I think we're going to pause the podcast here so I can go watch it, and we'll be right back. But kidding aside, that sounds phenomenal. I look forward to it. And then it kind of gives way to this interesting track called "Back on the Streets." Why don't you talk a little bit about this? Tell me your thoughts, because I don't know that we've ever even talked about half of these songs.
We probably haven't, honestly. This will go down chronologically as the first Roland penned Helloween song. I really like this. I think that it's Kids of the Century and Number One are the two singles that came off this album, and so this kind of is jammed in between those two, and I think it kind of holds things together quite well. It's unlike. I think this is really like one of the first times you hear a Helloween song that might not sound quite like a Helloween song. It's different. It's more of a like a melodic rock kind of, like a Frontiers kind of song.
I agree with you, except that opening riff actually reminds me of Murderer from Walls of Jericho at the very, very beginning. And then it goes in a completely different direction because it sounds nothing like anything on Walls of Jericho. But you're right. It's melodic. It's catchy. I think the verses are great. If the song suffers at all, it's probably the chorus, which is a bit meh. But the instrumental section, I think, is worth noting because the kind of for the forgotten member of this band, Marcus Grafkopf, what a phenomenal bassist that nobody ever talks about. And sprinkled throughout these albums are bass solos, this being one of them. And I would just say that it's absolutely, refreshing to hear that kind of addition to a metal band. And obviously Michael Kiske sounds phenomenal. So this is a good track and one of those songs that I don't think I ever appreciated when I was a kid.
Yeah, and I stand corrected. It's something I said earlier, because this was another song that was not part of Master Plan's Pumpkins album. So there were two Roland songs that didn't make it onto that compilation. I'd argue it should have. It's a damn good song. I always really liked it. I think it was underrated, underappreciated, as are pretty much most of the songs on this album. There's at least one song I do not care for very much, and I'll point it out when we get to it. But I like this tune. I think it's catchy, and I'm a sucker for Kiske, so just the fact that he's singing on it just makes it better than most of the songs I would have heard at the time. So I think it's pretty cool. And they do play it on that German rock show that I was mentioning earlier. We'll definitely have to post that because it is really cool seeing this lineup. seeing Ingo on drums and Roland with Wyke and Kisk and Marcus. But I have to echo what you say about Marcus is that I noticed like a lot of parts on this album where his bass playing really shines through. I think he's very underrated as a bass player, and he's been doing it for so long. And this is also really the first album where I think it's the first Helloween album where Marcus has songwriting credits that aren't a B-side. So he's starting to kind of get involved in the songwriting process. The first few albums though are mostly B-sides and bonus tracks for Roland now, or for Marcus. So nowadays he usually gets at least one or two songs on the album, and they usually are quite good. So I think he's definitely matured as a songwriter, but you can start to see the beginnings of that here.
Yes, I agree. And kind of when you think back to like this era, I think they were doing a little bit of experimentation, because when you go to the next track, number 1, this is unlike just about any song that Wyke had written up until this time. And quite frankly, if you listen to it, it doesn't follow the structure that most Wyke songs not only did back then, but would in the future. This is a real outlier for him. And only one of 2 tracks that he penned on the album, ironically enough. And to make it more ironic, the next track, which we'll get to, is the other song he penned. And it's kind of a joke track that was meant to be a B-side. So I don't know if it was like lack of inspiration or what, but number 1 is really, really different. And I gotta be honest, I don't love the track. I think it's slower. I think it's more deliberate. And in many ways, it has like an 80s electronica vibe. Not in terms of the instrumentation, but just in terms of the structure. It's a good song. It's very simple. You're just waiting for a payoff that never really comes. And it's oddly catchy in many ways, but I wouldn't say it's my favorite track on the album. I think it's better served when you don't think of Twilight of the Gods or one of those old tracks. And if you just listen to it on its face, it's good. I just don't think it's the best track that Wyke ever wrote. And I'm a sucker for his songwriting.
Yeah, and I am too. I think that it's just, like you said, it's just different. Like he doesn't typically write these kind of mid-tempo type of songs. I mean, if you think about like the songs that he had written on the previous albums, you're talking about Eagle Fly Free and Rise and Fall and Dr. Steen and Keeper of the Seven Keys and and A Tale That Wasn't Right, which was his power ballad. So like this is definitely a departure, and like you said, it's one of only 2 things that he wrote. He was quoted as saying at the time, straight away I could tell things were going wrong. The show was being run by Michael and Ingo, and Chris, the producer, simply didn't like my songs. He couldn't understand that certain cleverness they had, and he wanted Tommy Hansen to produce the album, who co-produced the Keeper 2 album, I believe. I think he was also the co-producer on Keeper 1. I'm not 100% sure, but so it's interesting because the powerhouse songwriting team of Kai and Wyke on those first 3 albums is now whittled down to 2 songs written by Wyke and obviously none by Kai because he's not in the band anymore. So this album is really heavily Kisk and Roland doing the majority of the songwriting, which is interesting. And like you said, like this isn't like the nowadays where Wyke only writes 2 songs, but one of them is like the blistering epic. Much like the opening track on the most recent album. It's just kind of like, it's almost like an anthem, like an arena anthem type song, arena rock song,
I would love to hear, and I don't know if these things exist, so I'm kind of making this up, but I would love to hear the Wyke demos from this album. What kinds of songs was he writing and proposing that never made it onto the album? Or would he simply just repurpose and repackage them on later albums? It would be fascinating to hear that.
I'll tell you an interesting fact. You might not have known this, but this song was written by Wyke in 1981.
Really?
And didn't see the light of day until this album 10 years later. So this was a song that he wrote as a young man. And just,
I had no idea.
Yeah, I just found that out recently, as a matter of fact. And it's interesting too because, like, just a little primer for when we talk about Chameleon. But Waiki wrote 3 songs, 4 songs on Chameleon, and all 4 of them are completely different from one another. And one of them is one of my least favorite Helloween songs of all time. And one of them is one of my favorite. I think one of the most underrated Halloween songs of all time, and I'll spoiler that one. I'm not going to mention what my least favorite is. You'll have to wait 6 months or however long until we talk about it. But the song "First Time," which opens the album, the lyrics are very juvenile, but the song is
Great.
It's a real rocker. It's fast. It's faster than anything on Pink Bubbles Go Ape, in my opinion.
And it gives you a false sense of reality as to what the album actually is. But again, a conversation for another time. The other Waiki track here is, again, a track that was supposed to be a B-side, aptly called, wait for it, wait for it, Heavy Metal Hamsters. I have to say, it should have been a B-side. It's not bad. It's just so comical that I'll see. It starts off with a guitar solo at the beginning, which is actually quite catchy, and the lead riff is also very, very simple, but oddly catchy. The lyrics,
well, you know that opening riff is the Deep Purple's "Rat Bat Blue" riff.
Yeah,
they lifted it right off of that, which I didn't find out until Helloween covered that song on Metal Jukebox,
and you're like, I know this.
Yeah, I'm the only asshole who's like, they just stole Heavy Metal Hamsters, but no, it was Deep Purple first. But go ahead.
The lyrics of this song, I don't know that there's any way to describe it except for patently absurd. But this was an absolute hit in my car this week. My daughter loved this song, and when it ended, asked me to play it again. I didn't. We went to Going Home instead, but she wanted to hear it again because there's something about it that I guess is really intriguing and catchy if you're a kid. It's very vanilla, kind of paint by numbers, but stays in your head. And I think the problem here is that Ingo's drumming is just so rhythmic and repetitive that it's just not the best tune on the album. The solos are kind of cool, but I can only imagine what they were thinking when this thing made it on the album proper.
Supposedly it has something to do with their previous record label, and it was kind of aimed at them. And so, yes, it was kind of a joke and meant to be a B-side, but sure enough, it ended up on the album. It's not my least favorite song on this album.
No,
I'll say that.
I agree with you. So far, I agree with you.
I mean, it's Waiki. Minus the one song, which I'm not going to reveal. The guy's never written a bad song. He's literally written one bad song. And this is not one of them. I think it's not a great song, and the title is goofy as hell, and the lyrics are childish, clearly. But it's catchy. I mean, and it has that really fun double guitar sound during the solo, which is more Helloween than a lot of things on this album. So, I mean, it's an interesting tune. And also, the lyrics were co-written by Waiki and Kisk. Probably one of the only times that they ever collaborated on anything up until the most recent couple of years. Yeah,
well said. An interesting break, if you will. And then we go to Going Home, which is another Kisk track. And I have to say, I think his songwriting is kind of underrated here because this is another one that's like an underrated rocker that I actually enjoy. It's like power metal meets scat. It's just got this like jazzy beat to it, which is really interesting. Again, you can kind of tell that it's a Kiss tune because of the layered vocals. I think
because there's a slide whistle in the first 5 seconds of the song.
That too. But what I think about is like that there's this big, powerful chorus, and that reminds me of things that they would do later on in their catalog. This song has actually grown on me a lot, and I think that the solos are cool, including the bass solo. A song that I think is better than people usually give it credit for. I like this song.
Right there with you.
And I didn't like it. I didn't like it when we were kids, but now I'm all about it. I think it's a good tune.
Yeah, I think it's got a really catchy chorus. I don't know, like I always thought Kisk was an underrated songwriter, and I'm disappointed that he hasn't written any songs for the Helloween since he's rejoined. I'm hoping that maybe changes going forward. But I mean, there's some songs on his solo albums that I really love. I thought that his contributions on the Keeper albums were really good. I mean, A Little Time and You Always Walk Alone, and We Got the Right. Those were the three songs. Big ones. Yeah. And you know, here too, his songs on Chameleon were definitely more experimental and weird. But I feel like here they kind of kept him at least in a hard rock kind of place. Because it to me, like, I think he was pushing for the band to be more of like a pop rock kind of band, and Wyke was like desperately trying to keep it as a metal band. And you know, I don't know that any two albums ever were as different one after the other as Chameleon and Master of the Rings would end up being. But this works for me. I again, like, you have to think about this as like, this is an album that people waited 3 years after, maybe longer, depending on where you live, after these Keeper of the Seven Keys albums, like, you know, tore everybody's heads off, and it's lackluster to follow up those albums with this. But like you said, in a vacuum, there's some good songs on here, and I think Going Home is definitely one of them.
So I guess the only logical question is, Someone's Crying, the next tune, another good one, or is miss the mark for you?
No, I happen to like this song, I think, even more than Going Home. And I'll tell you what, it was Australian power metal band Lord's cover of this song that made me realize how much better it was than I really thought, because they like kind of metaled it the way it should have been metaled the first time, kind of like they did when they covered the new Iron Maiden track better than Iron Maiden did, with the better mix, which we talked about way back when. But them doing a modern spin on a song that, if somebody was going to name Helloween songs, they might rattle off 50 songs before they get up to Someone's Crying, maybe more.
Maybe I would think more, to be honest with you.
And there's also a very excellent version of this on Masterplan's Pumpkins album with Rick Altsey on vocals. Not the last time we'll be mentioning him today. Stay tuned for that. But just a really good song. And again, I think a little preview into what we're going to get from Roland as a songwriter. He writes this and two of the next three songs.
So it's funny.
really good tune. I definitely like this, and if you've never heard it before, I encourage you to listen to it. And if you have, I definitely encourage you to check out Lord's cover of it, because it's really awesome.
I was going through this album, and I think that of all the tunes that I never paid a mind to, this was the one that jumped off the page at me this week, and I'm like, I'm an idiot for not liking this tune. It's basically Zeppelin meets power metal, which makes sense because that's kind of what Roland had, that bluesy background, so it actually makes sense. The double bass drum, it's here. It's on full display, and it's an album that, like, it's a song that's has the unenviable position of being behind Mankind and The Chance, which I would argue are two of the best songs in their entire catalog. How high? I don't know, but definitely up there. This song is phenomenal, and I got to be honest with you, I'm kind of hoping that you choose one of those songs as your song of the week, because I'm going to make Someone's Crying my song of the week, because it's the one that just, I guess I knew the least, even though I obviously knew the song, but it's the one that resonated with me the most. And I have some more thoughts, but I'll share it after we take a listen. Here's Someone's Crying by Helloween off Pink Bubbles Go Ape. what I think is worth noting here is that this was a song where I thought the drums were just absolutely outstanding, especially in the instrumental section. All of it, really. The solos, the whole package. This is a great song. This is the kind of tune that if I was to see them live and all of a sudden they started playing Someone's Crying, I would lose my mind, because not only is it unexpected, I don't know if they've ever played this live. Like, that's how much of a deep cut it is in many ways. I am all about it. I think that the fans are the only ones that lose out by them not really touching some of these Roland songs, because they're that good. What a great song, and underappreciated at that.
Yeah, you have a better chance of hearing it at a Master Plan show, quite honestly.
Yeah, really. You mentioned that 1992 show, or that tour that they did after the album about a year afterwards. They didn't play it. So as far as I know, Helloween has never played this live. So here's hoping that when we see them in about 10 days that they'll play it. But kidding aside, I won't hold my breath. And that brings us...
I wouldn't put house money on it. I'll just say that.
Let's get to track 8, which is Mankind, the second Roland tune in a row. This is the epic on the album. It clocks in at just over 6 minutes or so. This is another gem, but I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, this is. I'm going to say something that's potentially confusing. This is not the best song on the album, but it's my favorite song on the album.
Interesting.
What
does that mean?
I'll explain as we move along, but it's my song of the week. I absolutely love this song. I think it is without a doubt the most underrated Helloween song ever. I was kind of searching the YouTube archives today, digging up versions of Andy singing this during the Master of the Rings tour, which he does a really solid job on. Like, he got a lot of shit for singing Kiss songs, like, an octave lower or whatever. I mean, The guy had a completely different set of pipes. But I thought he did this song and the chance, for that matter, justice, more than justice. I thought he did a hell of a job. But this is just it starts out with this just slow build, and then it just kicks in. It's just a really fantastic song, like really, really great. Why don't we give it a listen, and I'll be very excited to hear what you have to say about it.
So you asked about my opinion. This is a phenomenal song, and it's probably my second favorite on the album. We haven't gotten to my actual favorite, but I love the intro. I think the bass and the cymbals just are a perfect marriage, and it has that epic feel to it. Beautiful verses, Kisk's soaring vocals, which is always a highlight, and what I thought was a very good mix. I think this song is just mixed exceptionally well. It's one of those choruses that I don't even attempt to sing, because I can't, I can't go that high, but I love it. And if I had to give one knock on what's otherwise almost a perfect song, they have this instrumental section, which is just like a Van Halen ripoff in many ways. And it's not the best, but even though it's not the best, for my money, it doesn't really detract from the rest of the song. It's just a phenomenal tune.
That was very well said. I think we said everything that needed to be said about that song. If you're out there and you just are not familiar with it, I mean, listen to it. It is it's a really, really cool song, very underrated. You know what? I was just thinking of something, and then I had a brain fart, and then it came back. So I remember the Pumpkin box set that it came out in 1998, I believe, and it was only released in Japan. And my good friend Mike, who we talk about a lot, he gave it to me as a birthday gift. I think the year like a birthday / graduation gift. I think when I turned 18, and it was. I always thought it was interesting because the third disc on this was songs from Pink Bubbles and Chameleon, along with a couple of live tracks from the aforementioned Live in the UK / Keepers Live album, and those songs stuck out to me because they were chosen to be on that. And it was interesting to me because they went with Mankind and The Chance instead of number one, which was a single.
Right.
Kids of the Centuries there. But those were the choices for that little compilation, which I thought was kind of interesting. And so that's why that song was on my radar when I was younger, because I thought it was interesting that it was chosen to be on that compilation many years ago. Obviously somebody felt strongly about it. But then it goes into this next track, which is, oh my God, it's such a dud. I'm sorry, Marcus. I know it's like your first songwriting credit on a main Helloween album, but it's just such a blah song. It's and to cram it in between the two best songs on the album, it's such a crime. If anything else, it's like what they call the popcorn match in wrestling, where they need you to an excuse for you to get up and get something to eat and go buy a shirt before the main event starts. But I don't know if you feel similarly, but this is easily my least favorite song on the album.
So I don't even know. Did you mention the name? I'm Doing Fine, Crazy Man. I don't even know if you mentioned.
No, I thought maybe we could get by without even saying it.
This song is completely out of place, and that says a lot on an album that has a woman kissing a fish on the cover. So I want to start by saying that it is goofy even by Helloween standards, and there's goofiness that permeates the entire catalog.
It's not a bad song. It's just
I wasn't done.
It's just blah.
I don't hate it. I don't like it. I don't want to hear it, but I don't feel the need to skip it. Like, it's listenable. It's not terrible. It's not very good, but it's not terrible. And it has that jazzy upbeat quality, which is kind of endearing in a way. I don't hate the song. I think I actually like it a tad better than you do.
I will say this. Marcus wrote a better song during these sessions that ended up as a B-side that I think would have been a better choice, although the expletive in the title might have caused it to be not included.
We will get there shortly. This song, or the last two the songs on the album are very interesting. The first is The Chance. It's another Grappo song, and I gotta be honest, one of my favorite songs of all time, let alone on this album. I am a sucker for this song. It is so tight and well written. And to your point, a treat to hear live. Amazing lyrics. I wouldn't change a note of it. I just wished I could hear it live again. Tight drumming, tight, riffs throughout, and just underrated bass lines that kind of drive this thing forward. Phenomenal. And something we haven't talked about, the use of keyboards on this track make this song really stand out amongst the others on the album. It's shocking to me that we don't have this as one of our songs of the week, because in my opinion, it's probably the best song pound for pound on the album, Mankind being a close second.
Well, that's why I said earlier, Mankind's not the best song on the album. It's my favorite, but this is the best song on the album. It's the most Helloween song, in my opinion, and I think the fact that they continued to play it live well after Kiss leaving the band is proof of that. I'd argue they'd still be playing it if Roland was still in the band from time to time. Master Plan has played it live in recent years. And I'm glad, that was one of the things I kind of forgot to mention, is that this album on the whole uses keys and synthesization. Is that a word?
Sure, now it is.
Yeah. more by far more so than they did in the Keeper eras. I mean, you know, you have songs like Dr. Steen where, you know, for sure there's that organ and everything, but it feels like there's more. You would think that there was like there should be a credited keyboard player in the band. And I always thought it was funny that there was like always a guy on the side of the stage playing keyboards when the band would play live. I don't know if that's still the case, but that was definitely true a couple of times that we've seen them where there was like the unsung keyboard player that doesn't even get to be on the stage. But this song for sure, you can definitely hear that kind of like as an overlay throughout the whole song. But the guitar solo is awesome. The chorus is super catchy. The verses are super catchy. The lyrics are super uplifting. I think Roland and Wyke were battling between the chants and number one for most uplifting song lyrics on the album. But this is a real winner. And then when you get to that last 45 seconds and Kiss just hits that high note, oh my God, goosebumps. I was just thinking today when I was listening to the song, to hear him sing it live. I don't know if he even could hit that note anymore, but like how amazing that would be. Just a really outstanding song. I was absolutely convinced you were going to choose it for your song of the week, and so I figured I could get both of the songs played on the episode. Maybe I'll just add some audio in the background or whatever, just because it's just that good of a song. But I gotta say, Roland was I think Roland was the all-star on this album.
I agree with you, and
that might be a new thing that we do every time we do a Helloween album. We choose who the songwriting all-star is, and I think in this case it's got to be Roland, because we're talking about Back on the Streets, Someone's Crying, Mankind, and The Chants. I mean,
I can't argue with that. The only thing I would say is there's an argument to be made that The Chants should have been the last song on the album, and they should have flipped it with Your Turn, which is a ballad to end the album. Not a bad ballad. It's a Kiss-penned tune, but it's really just an acoustic guitar and Kiss, which is a winning combination. But for some reason, it's a little bit of a downer on the way to end the album, in my opinion. I think that this song is actually very reminiscent of his solo material that would come out a few years later. And you're kind of getting a taste of it or a preview of it here. It's in many ways, I would kind of describe it as a show-off tune for Kiss, because he kind of gets to show his range throughout this. Enjoyable, just maybe not the best way to close the album.
You know, even live, he would play the acoustic guitar to start out the song, which I don't know that a lot of people even realize that he could do that. I always really like this song, but again, you know me and power ballads. I'm a sucker for, I guess it's a love song. I thought it was a cool way to kind of end the album, and it's interesting, like both of this and Chameleon has a very self-indulgent Michael Kiske song ending it. Yep. Two very different songs, but also two very songs on the mellow side, and definitely more reminiscent of Kiske's solo material. I absolutely agree with you there. But I always really liked this song, and it has a special place in my heart because when I was helping to run the Helloween Future World website, Your Turn was the name of our chat. God, what the hell did they even call that? A message board? Yeah, that's what those were. And at one point, the band didn't have an official page. So the page went down for a long while. So all of their message board people came over to us, and our message board just blew up, and I was just like in heaven. It was such a cool thing to all these longtime Helloween fans chatting and stuff. So shout out to Chris Scarrett, who I ran the page with. It just recently, his server crashed, and we lost all the pages and stuff. And he was like, "Do you care? Like, do you want me to try and like dig this stuff back up somehow, try to revive it?" And I was like, "Nah, it's fine." Like, I think the last time I updated it was when Keeper 7 Keys the Legacy came out.
Oh, wow.
Or maybe even before that. But, this was before social media. We would update it with news or what the other ex-members were up to and stuff like that. And it was a lot of fun doing that. And I even got the chance to chat with Waiki when he randomly IM'd me out of nowhere. Just people laughed at me for putting my screen name on the website. Well, who's laughing now? But yeah, so that's kind of what this song, another thing that this song makes me think of. But yeah, I don't know. To me, like, I feel like this is, I think the album ends the right way with like the one ass kicking metal tune and then ends with the kind of soft, like, ballad. I think it just works here. And it's by the two guys who, like I mentioned earlier, kind of the strong horses of the songwriting for this album. I mean, they wrote about 75 to 80% of this album just between the two of them. So
I am very curious to hear your score of this album on a scale of 1 to 10, but I think we'd be remiss not to talk about some of these bonus tracks. The first of which is a Japanese bonus track, aptly named Shit and Lobster. You cannot make this up. This was another Groskopf song, but it just didn't make the album proper for obvious reasons. And by obvious, I mean just the title. This is a weird song. This is a song, in my opinion, that would have been well served to be on Chameleon because it's not a bad tune. I actually like it. It's oddly catchy, and it's not metal. It's more of like a soft rock tune, but like there's something endearing about this. It just doesn't fit on the album. So well selected to be a B-side, I think.
I also think the lyrics are oddly apt for 2023. If you go back and look at it, it's really interesting. But this is, to me, is such a way better song than I'm Doing Fine Crazy Man, which was, made the album proper. You're right. It's an offbeat, off the wall, weird song. But it is good. It's catchy. And, again, it shows that Marcus has some, songwriting chops. And, this appeared, I think, on a later edition of the Japanese version of this album, but it also is, it's also a B-side on the Kids of the Century single, along with a cover. Oh my God, you want to talk about self-indulgent Michael Kiske moments? Well, there's one, if you haven't heard Michael Kiske do a cover of Carl Perkins' Blue Suede Shoes, made most famous by the great Elvis Presley, who Michael Kiske was never shy about having much adoration for.
I was going to say, who do you think selected this track as a bonus track?
Yeah, it's pretty clear. I'm surprised he didn't manage to get it onto the main album. But he does a hell of a job. I mean, no one's ever going to confuse the King with Michael Kiske, but I think he does a really fun job of doing this kind of metalized version of it, and you can tell he's having a blast. I
make a concerted effort now to turn this over to you because in terms of the number one single, there were two bonus tracks. I just want you to say it. Which was the one that Wyckoff wrote?
less hambourgeois, hambourgeois. Walkways. God, I want to ask him about this song so badly, like what the hell it means. But this was one of the two tracks that were B-sides on the number one single. This song is freaking awesome. It is this just bluesy guitar solo, pretty much. It's like an almost 6-minute, just kind of this bluesy jam session type of thing that, like, had I not known any better, I would have guessed it was Roland's doing. This didn't seem like something that Waiki would do. And they have this B-side during the Chameleon days called Red Socks and the Smell of Trees that is like almost 11 minutes long, and it's like this just meandering disaster.
It's better than the Red Trees and Smell of Socks. That's what I've always thought to myself.
That's fair. But this is, on the other hand, is just just fantastic. Every time I listen to it, I'm like, this is really just impressive. Again, it didn't make it onto the album, but nor did it belong on there. But it's really cool and definitely worth seeking out if you never heard it before, because it's just like this slow bluesy number, but it's also very, very catchy, very enjoyable. And it really just goes to show you like how much reach these guys had as musicians when they kind of dug themselves out of that metal, rabbit hole. There was a lot of interesting stuff. I mean, you'd hear Roland singing on a cover of "Closer to Home." As a B-side years later, like there's some really Helloween was the master of B-sides. They would just release just a shit ton of these things, and I was obsessed with collecting all of them when I was younger, or just hearing them and knowing them all. And now I do, and now I can speak grandly about Les Humble Gordezesis Walks Ways.
It leaves us with one more B-side, You Run With the Pack, another Grosskopf tune, kind of nondescript in many ways, but it's not a bad little tune. I think it's a little different than the rest of the album, but I kind of liked it.
Yeah, again, like another song that he wrote that was better than the one that ended up on the album. This might have been the one that would have made the most sense to be on the album of the three that Marcus wrote. It is a bit offbeat. I think it is a bit of an outlier, but it's a little bit. It has a little bit more of a pace to it, a little more of a toe tapper. But it's a solid tune. I don't think anybody's missing out too much by not hearing it. But it's a good tune, and I thought it was cool that the band would re-release all these albums with all of that extra material that wasn't, especially in the US, wasn't readily available. They would either come out as bonus tracks or they would just have an entire bonus disc of B-sides. They didn't record a ton of B-sides with this album. I think there was 7 or 8 with Chameleon, and about 7 with Master of the Rings. They started to record a lot more after this, but a lot of interesting stuff. I've been racking my brain trying to decide what I want to rank, what I want to give this album on a scale of 1 to 10. I might let you go first and see what you have to say, but I also went back and looked at what we ranked the previous albums, and we were both, I think, in agreement. Not on the newest album, but on on Walls of Jericho and the Keepers. I think that we both gave the Keeper albums a 9.75, and we both gave Walls of Jericho an 8.0, I believe.
So I prefer Walls of Jericho to this album. I think that this album has about 5 or 6 songs that are really, 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 really damn good, if not phenomenal. And then it's got a couple of tracks that I'm like, and then one kind of dud. To me, it's a 7.5. It's a very good album, and it's an album that if you would have asked me 25 years ago, I think I would have probably said it's a 5. It's not. There's a lot of good material in here. You just got to have to spend some time with it. And I think that number has gone up dramatically over the years for me, because it was, like I said, it would have been much lower, but it's not an 8. This album is just not good enough to be an 8, but it's certainly an enjoyable listen.
Let's give it most improved, because I think when you first heard it, you gave it a -3.
It's fair. That's probably true. What about you?
You know what? I'm gonna give it an 8, and kind of put it right alongside Walls of Jericho. There's things I like about both albums that are very different from one another. Obviously, the production and vocals are much better on Pink Bubbles Go Ape,
without question.
But you're missing Kai's songwriting. But then again, like, you have Mankind and The Chance on here, so it's pretty much even for me. I think that's probably as high as I could give it, just because there's just some songs that kind of, I don't know. A part of me almost feels like 8 might be a bit too low. Yeah, screw it. I'm going 8.25. I'm changing it.
Wow, on the fly.
Yeah, it's just 8 just felt too low. Helloween is just one of those bands that can do no wrong for me. I'm very curious where I land with Chameleon when we get to it, and I'm curious where you land as well. But there's just so much that I like about this album that, like, that one dud Marcus song and Heavy Metal Hamsters don't really spoil the fun for me. I think there's enough just high end material to keep it high for me. So yeah, I kind of had to talk that one out.
But I'm glad we got there. A very fun listen, I think, if you're a Helloween fan, and ultimately, I have no doubt we'll be covering them again. So very, very interesting stuff. I want to just mention a pair of news items that I think are interesting in their own way. The first is Metal Church, who's coming out with a new album. It's due out May 26th. It's just another couple of weeks. The album is called Congregation of Annihilation, and apparently they're going back to more of a thrashier sound on this record. I am very curious to hear what they are going to sound like without Mike Howe on the vocals, who passed away in July of 2021. I think that this album has potential, though, and I'm going to actually give it a listen. Do you have any interest in checking it out, or is it kind of just like, if you
I'll check it out. Who's their singer now?
So I believe it's Mark Lopez of Ross the Boss, who has stepped in and taken over the reins full time. Not a bad set of pipes, but hard to replace Mike Howe, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. There were some songs that I heard. I'm not gonna say a big fan. I don't really know that many songs, but the songs I have heard are just like pretty solid, just traditional heavy metal. So I'll definitely give it a shot when it comes out. Definitely.
So that's number one. And number two, something that I don't think you're going to be giving a shot. Have you heard about Joey DeMaio from Manowar doing a spoken word tour? Have you heard anything about this?
No, but nothing about that sentence is shocking to me.
So he's going out on tour in Germany, apparently doing about a dozen shows of just a spoken words tour in November. And care to guess what the name of this tour might be?
I'm racking my brain. I wish you gave me more time. I would have come up with something clever.
I'll just give it to you. It's the Words of Power tour. Yeah, you could not pay me enough money to go sit through this thing, but by the same token, if I didn't have to pay, I'd be... I'm just curious. So needless to say, I'll be looking at YouTube in November, but I don't think I could sit through the whole thing.
Well, hopefully he'll be releasing it on DVD and Blu-ray, and we can watch it at home. I mean, I've only seen Manowar live once, and he did speak for about 7 or 8 minutes during that show.
I bet he
could have heard 2 songs from Kings of Metal, but instead we got to hear about how high quality the T-shirts made in 1992 were. So I wish I was kidding.
No, I believe that. Which brings us to next week, and
not quite yet though, because I have one other thing I want to mention.
Oh, yes, please. Go ahead. Another news item.
I just found out earlier today that the German neoclassical power metal band At Vance, who I don't know if they ever necessarily said they were done, but apparently are not. They have not released an album since 2012's Facing Your Enemy, but the core 3 members from 2012 are reuniting. Olaf Lenk on guitars and keyboards. He is the remaining original member of At Vance. He goes back all the way to 1998. As I mentioned earlier, Rick Altsey of Masterplan. He was actually the singer for At Vance before he joined Masterplan. He remains their vocalist and follows in a long line of fantastic vocalists that have been in this band, including Oliver Hartman and Mats Levin, just to name 2 right there. And rounding out the trio is drummer Kevin Cott, who I believe joined the band shortly after the last album was released, and he was also he's also a part of the band Almanac. I believe he's the drummer for them as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I've always been a fan. I thought they were always kind of like this under the radar band that just had like really excellent guitar work. Always had really like excellent vocalists. I got turned on to them with their the Evil in You album that came out in 2003. Just Mats Levin's vocals just sold me. There were some really catchy tunes on there, so it's I'm just happy to hear it because they're a really cool band, and if you ever dig back into their back catalog, they have a slew of incredible covers. And they actually were on this compilation that came out with a bunch of other bands, and a number of songs that they covered include Shout by Tears for Fears, The Logical Song by Supertramp, which is a phenomenal cover if you haven't heard it, Eye of the Tiger by Survivor, Desperado by the Eagles, Money, Money, Money by ABBA, SOS by ABBA, The Winner Takes It All by ABBA, and a couple of classical tunes as well. So really cool stuff. So yeah, I'm excited. I just talked about Advance more than I thought I would, but here we are. Sorry to interrupt you.
I look forward to that. I don't claim to be a huge fan of the band, but I'll definitely check out the new one. I have a couple of their old albums, and some of them are better than others, but I'm interested. I'm curious to hear what they sound like after about a decade hiatus. And
yeah,
with that,
spoiler alert, I'll probably choose The Evil in You one of these days to talk about, just because that was always the one that stuck out to me, and I think there's a couple of really, really cool songs on there. So maybe one week where I can't think of anything else, I'll throw that out there.
Not a bad choice now that they're back together, especially. So
yeah. So I'm curious what you got for me next week.
I've had this in the back pocket for a while. And then I kind of thought about when it had come out, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to save this because it's an anniversary of an album that came out 4 decades ago. It came out 40 years ago on May 25th, 1983, and that's Dio's Holy Diver, the debut album from Ronnie James Dio. We have not done any Dio solo material, and then it just kind of hit me that I was saving it for this week, and I've been saving it for a long time. So that being said, we're going way back. We're going back 40 years. We've talked about his tenure in Black Sabbath. We've not talked about any of his solo material, and it all started right here, with Holy Diver. So I think that you're going to be pleasantly surprised if you haven't heard this full album. You're going to know quite a bit of it, although not all of it, and I think it'll make for an interesting chat.
I know some of it. I don't know all of it, but at least I know I'm gonna like it. So yeah. That's always good. Rainbow in the Dark is, although it's probably the most overplayed Dio song, I still think it's a great song. So
it's fantastic. And anyone that says otherwise is wrong. I mean, it's just a phenomenal tune.
Yeah, and then Holy Diver is another one that I absolutely know for sure. But I have to say, the rest of the album, I don't know that I'm that familiar with the rest of it. So I look forward to digging into that. I think that's going to be really good.
Yeah, it's a very digestible album. There's only 9 songs, and since it came out so many years ago, it's not particularly long. I think you'll enjoy it. So we leave that for next week. If you like what you hear, consider joining the Patreon, as we mentioned earlier. Give us a like and a follow. It helps others find the show. And we appreciate all the interaction on our Facebook group at Metal Exchanges and all the other social media. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and if you're a new listener, we got like a ton of people checked out the Typo Negative episode we did last week, and we got a ton of action on the Instagram too. Those hashtags, they get people to come out of the woodwork that you wouldn't be able to reach any which way. So a ton of Typo Negative and Peter Steele tribute Instagram pages. I was really really interesting, the outpouring of just recognition of us covering that album. So good on you for choosing that. That was it really seemed to resonate with a lot of people out there.
I'm glad, and it was selfishly something I wanted to cover. So got a little 2 birds with 1 stone there. But enjoy the week. We'll cover some Dio next week. I'm sure we'll talk about our Helloween experience when we go see them live in a couple of weeks, and we'll come back.
Oh, there will be a set list dissection. I'm sure of it.
I have no doubt. And since I haven't seen the set list, it'll be quite the surprise as I walk into that show. So enjoy the week.
I did see that there was a a pro shot show that they did in Europe maybe a week or two ago. And I like clicked on it and then I was like, I don't want to see this so soon before the show. So I just clicked off of it. I think I saw what the opening track was, but they also only played, I think, 11 or 12 songs because it was a festival. I'm hoping that they play more when we see them on tour, but I'm also not expecting them to play like 26 songs like they did the first time around, especially with Hammerfall opening, which I keep forgetting. That's always nice when the opening band isn't like a complete, like, you know, swing and a miss, or just like a band that has nothing to do with anything or whatever. I would think most Helloween fans will be excited to see Hammerfall play. So,
I mean, I'm looking forward to it. They don't disappoint live, so I assume they're only going to get about 45 minutes or an hour, but it should be fun, and you know, we'll come back and we'll share our thoughts after the show for sure.
Yes, definitely. It'll probably be not our Dio episode, but the one after that. We'll give a little recap.
Sounds good, my friend. Enjoy the week, and I will talk to you soon.
Alrighty, take care, buddy.